Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm doing my February 2025 wrap up. It's very sad. I only read 2 books this month. I had a ton of work that I had to do. The grand opening of my bar was the beginning of February, and I basically worked like 3 weeks straight. I have since had days off, and I'm back to like a pretty decent reading schedule. But yeah, so I knew that the first 2 months of the year were going to be difficult for me to read, but I was able to get through 2 of them, one of them being one of my most anticipated reads of the year, and then the other being a new release from Cassandra Celia. This is from a Twisted Retreat package that I received very, very recently. And we're gonna dive in and we're gonna talk about them both. So yeah, I do have full-length reviews on both of these. So this will be a real like kind of quick, easy breezy wrap up video, but do not worry, I will have hopefully a larger wrap up for the month of March. I'm almost finished with Wayward by S.A. Harrion, which is the follow-up to Briardark, which I believe came out in 2022, 2023. I don't remember, but I'm almost done with that. It's a really, really interesting series, and it's one of the few books that has convinced me to pick up the rest of the series as it unfolds, so I'm very excited about that. But without further ado, let's talk about Grady Hendrix's Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. So this was on my most anticipated reads list for 2024, and then got pushed back about 6 months to a 2025 release date. It came out in January, and she is large. It's about 450 pages. And it's definitely not what I expected whatsoever. I'm gonna read the inside flap really quickly. So it says, "There's power in a book. They call them wayward girls, loose girls, girls who grew up too fast. And they're sent to the Wellwood house in St. Augustine, Florida, where unwed mothers are hidden by their families to have their babies in secret, to give them up for adoption, and most important of all, to forget any of it ever happened. 15-year-old Fern arrives at the home in the sweltering summer of 1970, pregnant, frightened, and alone. Under the watchful eye of the stern Miss Wellwood, she meets a dozen other girls in the same predicament. There's Rose, a hippie who insists she's going to find a way to keep her baby and escape the commune, and Zinnia, a budding musician who plans to marry her baby's father, and Holly, a wisp of a girl, barely 14, mute, and pregnant by no one knows who. Everything the girls eat, every moment of their waking day, and everything they're allowed to talk about is strictly controlled by the adults who claim they know what's best for them. Then Fern meets a librarian who gives her an occult book about witchcraft, and power is in the hands of the girls for the first time in their lives. But power can destroy as easily as it creates, and it's never given freely. There's always a price to be paid, and it's usually paid in blood." This book was probably one of the most heartfelt and feminist releases that I've read from Grady Hendrix. It had a lot of moments that reminded me very much of My Best Friend's Exorcism, specifically the ending. The endings of both of these novels are very much rooted in reality in a way that, regardless of all of the supernatural and horror events that go into a fiction novel, those endings both kind of tie up what it's like growing up under certain circumstances in the real world in a very, very realistic way. I thought Grady Hendrix handled so many of his female characters in a very respectful manner. We have a lot of very, very fragile women in very fragile states, but we're also able to see them in very, very strong lights. They do get these like amazing independent lenses thrown on them, and the book is about painting them more than just beyond their condition or predicament. I thought this was, for the most part, a very, very well done book. However, I think the entire introduction of witchcraft, what made this story more of a supernatural tale, instead of just kind of like a slice of life moment at a dark time in early American history, or like whatever, 70s American history. I think introducing the witchcraft kind of took away from the core message of this book. Kind of in the same vein as Tananarive Dew's The Reformatory, where I felt like if you had taken a lot of the supernatural elements out of that story and just really focused on like a historical fiction on the actual reformatory and kind of removed a lot of the side stories and a lot of the ghosts, you still would have had a really brutal horror novel, but it would feel more genuine. I felt like in that story, the ghosts really took away from the actual horrors that happened. And that's kind of how I felt with this book. I felt like the introduction of the witchcraft and kind of like the hurdles the girls had to jump over to overcome all of the things that was happening with like the witchy side stories took away from the overall horrors of what the women in this book were going through and the realities that did actually happen in 1970 America. And I just found myself constantly uninterested in these elements of witchcraft. And in the back of the book, Grady Hendrix talks about how when he originally wrote the book, there wasn't any witchcraft in it. I do like this idea of kind of paralleling pregnancy out of wedlock and how it's looked upon by society to how he uses the witches to kind of elevate that metaphor in this book. I think that's a really interesting take, and I understand why it's there. I just felt like it took up too much of the story, and it would have been such a more powerful moment if it had been trimmed down quite significantly. There's not a lot of humor in this book, and there's a lot of body horror. And I say there's not a lot of humor because Grady Hendrix is very much known to be a pretty humorous author. It does have like a couple moments, like the inclusion of the lava lamp throughout the story is kind of tongue-in-cheek and like very funny. But the vast majority of this book is very serious, and a lot of Grady Hendrix's light-hearted tone is toned down a bit, I would say, to kind of make it feature the seriousness that this book is trying to convey. Again, the body horror in this, I thought this was a brilliant way to do it, is told through the complications of pregnancies in different scenarios. I thought it was very well done. I thought it was very tasteful. I thought it was really graphic and kind of difficult to read, and I think it gave me that kind of squeamish feeling that you get when reading body horror, and I think he absolutely nailed it. Tons of trigger warnings in this book, but for the most part, I really, really enjoyed it. This was a 4-star read for me. Really, really glad I picked it up. I definitely like it more than How to Sell a Haunted House. I don't think it lives up to Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires or Best Friend's Exorcism, but definitely one of the better reads from Grady Hendrix that I have picked up. Okay, next up, we have the Elric Undoing by Cassandra Celia. I wanted to love this book. The cover, this is really one of those moments of like, don't judge a book by its cover, because I really did think that this cover was such an interesting and kind of like fun and gothic cover design for Twisted Retreat. I was really excited about it. I read Sugarcane last year, which was my first introduction to Cassandra Celia, which is like kind of like an extreme horror novella told through the perspective of the wife of a serial killer, and I thought it was really well done. So I was hoping that we were going to get a lot of those elements in here. And I also went into this expecting it to be more of an extreme horror novel. It does have like a trigger warning at the beginning of the book, and I'm still not really sure what exactly happened or what the point of this book was. I'm going to read the inside flap. Piet Cabello never expected her life to change with the arrival of one letter, sent by her estranged, deceased grandmother. But when her mother immediately threatens her life at the very mention of the letter's contents, Piet flees the home she's been trapped in, escaping her mother's proclaimed demise and into the teeth of the mysterious town of Elric to claim her inheritance. When she arrives, Piet is suddenly thrust into an occult world with residents who share a history flushed with dark magic and who worship a mysterious leader. And, of course, a manor haunted by ghosts that demand she leave immediately. In search of a family she felt like she never had, Piet is determined to uncover the truth about the town that scared her mother so deeply and stole her grandmother away all those years ago. Drawn to its dark past, Piet's intrigue won't let her leave, and Elric doesn't want to let her go either. Before she realizes it, Piet is enveloped in the town's customs and rituals, disguised as friendships, and the longer she stays, the less interested she becomes in uncovering Elric's secrets after all. The town Piet's mother fled from long ago might be the place where Piet finds the home she's been searching for. Unfortunately, it might also be her undoing. I really wanted to like this book. I really liked Sugarcane. So I was really, really disappointed when I picked this up, and it was kind of everything Sugarcane wasn't. What was cool about Sugarcane is a lot of that story was about inferring what was happening. A lot of things were kind of happening off screen, and a lot of things were about a woman in denial and like kind of building up her own denial, and you're in that woman's head for the vast majority of the story. This one is a lot more of an action-driven tale, but still written almost exclusively from the mind of our main character, which doesn't work because that means all of the action happens off the page, and instead of ever seeing what's happening, we are really only told how our main character feels about it. And again, that worked with the concept of sugarcane, but with this, it did not. This is a story about a cult in a creepy town. It's basically The Wicker Man, but modern. Yeah. Except all of the great things that make The Wicker Man, and by proxy Midsummer, are completely inferred. Like, you just really don't see anything. This book, the entire novel, instead of showing the reader what's happening, just tells the reader what's happening, and then tells the reader how they're supposed to feel about it, and tells the reader how our protagonist is feeling, and tells the reader who we should trust and what we should think about certain characters. And we are never given any room to breathe and make those decisions for ourselves because we don't have enough screen time with any of those plot points, character arcs, or characters in general. We barely meet anybody. We barely see this town. We are almost exclusively in our main character's head. And yet the novel is written in a way in which depicting the action would benefit it by miles. The writing was also extremely redundant and repetitive. Our leads were extremely unlikely. Well, they were unlikely. They are very unlikely characters. I would not believe them in real life. I do not believe a character like Pyatt actually exists. But I also find them all very unlikable. I did not like Pyatt. I had a really difficult time getting behind her and rooting for her. And when we get to the big twist at the end, I didn't care because everything that had been built up to get to that point still confused me, and I didn't understand it because nothing was fleshed out. There's a lot of mythology. There's a lot of cult, I don't even know if that's the right word, but there's a lot of folklore within this town, a lot of superstition, and we're kind of told it in passing and then never really looked into it. It's never really looked into again. So we're just supposed to kind of take what we learn at face value and like move on. And Cassandra Celia constantly is kind of writing off her laziness with developing this plot and this folklore by just saying that nobody in town will explain anything to our main character. Yet by the time we get to the end of the novel, I still don't think anything was explained, so this big reveal at the end meant nothing to me. And this was just, it was difficult for me to get through. It's really not that long. It's like 250 pages, and I spent way more time on it than I should have. I expected to finish this in like 2 or 3 days, and it took me like over a week. And I just expected so much more from Cassandra Celia because I've seen her do better. But I just get this feeling that maybe long form isn't her strong point. I think she works much better in kind of a tight short story novella style setting because the way she wrote Sugarcane I found to be very effective. And then translating something in a similar style, I guess, into a more proactive story didn't work for me. Tim Meyer has a novel called Lacuna's Point, and I'm a huge fan of Tim Meyer. And when I read that novel, I was like, there's a really cool story here, but I felt like the story was told through the wrong main character's lenses. And that's also how I felt about this book. I really felt like there's an interesting story here, but had we read it through Winona's perspective instead of Pyatt's, we would have actually had something really intriguing. Winona was a much more interesting character. She had way more of a motivation. I could understand where she was coming from a lot better, and the way that she was kind of sucked into the world made way more sense than the way that Pyatt was. And I still think we could have had this weird dynamic relationship between Pyatt and Winona, but it would have made a lot more sense reading from Winona's point of view. And so I do think that there's merit to this book, and there's very interesting ideas. But there's almost too many ideas, and none of them are figured out. And they aren't executed effectively, unfortunately. So that was a 2-star read. Not a 1-star. This book didn't offend me. This book didn't really piss me off. It just kind of disappointed me. Yeah, I really, really wanted to enjoy it, but I did not. Anyhow, those are my 2 books for the month of February. I'm like so bummed that I got through only 2, but March is going to be better. March will hopefully be better. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I'm trying to post on Tuesdays and Fridays for right now. Hopefully going back to Mondays and Thursdays really soon, but for right now I think it's going to be Tuesdays and Fridays. And if you enjoyed these videos, please hit my like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah!